This committee is only open to the members who sit on the governance committee, and that would be Albert Hayes. Tom Stover has been excused, and our chairman, Dave Bergstresser, as ex officio. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Ferrara, if you could roll call.
I will, Mr. Chairman. David Bergstresser.
Present.
Michael Astafan.
Present.
Albert Hayes.
Here.
Tom Stover.
Excused.
Mark Finkel.
Here.
Michael Clark.
Here.
Robert Leslie.
Here.
Robert Fulton.
Here.
John Hudson.
Here.
Carol Wright.
Here.
Richard Farrar. Here. Mr. Chairman.
Need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented, unless you want to make some changes in. Albert?
I'd like to make just a motion to adopt the agenda.
I second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the minutes of December 13th.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes December 13th.
I'll second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any approved or any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. We'll go right into the business part of the meeting. There's no old business, new business. Before I turn it over to Mr. Leslie, I'd like to make a few comments of how we got where we are right now and where we're headed. Back at our last meeting, the governance committee was looking at revising our committee structure from 9 to 3 committees. And then during discussion, a suggestion was brought up for a 4th committee. What we're hoping to do is to reduce the amount of committees to make it more efficient and more effective, to save time and hopefully get more people involved in the long run. In order to do that, we need to change our charters, and we also need to take a look at our bylaws because they go hand in hand, parallel. So in order to change our charters from 9 to 4, we also need to make some changes with bylaws. I've asked Rob to take a look at that for us. I did give him short notice. I did not expect him to have it completed for this meeting, but I'm going to have him give us just a brief summary of where he's at with this. And then once he's done all the revisions and draft, I will have him send that off to the governance committee, and then we'll review it and make our suggestions for changes. And then once we finalize our draft proposals, then we'll get those copies off to the full board for their review prior to a meeting. Now, you know, this could be ready for March, it could be for April, so I'm not going to put a specific date, but we will be working on this over the next couple months. Rob, if you
Sure. You had, we had presented, and you had presented to the committee draft charters, both for governance, audit, and finance. And it asked me to take a look at those as well as put together a charter for operations. With each of the model committee charters already available, I took a look through those. There really isn't a whole lot to change from the model. They do fit pretty well with our needs. So updating, obviously, where it says name of authority, we would insert the Hudson River Black River Regulating District. That seems kind of obvious. And obviously, whenever the date upon which the board adopts, we'll insert those dates. The only other thing in 2 of the 3 committee charters had to do with a phrase in the beginning, or actually end of the second page, under committee structure and meetings. The model charters provide that all committee members are expected to attend each meeting in person or via telephone or video conference. Because New York State's open meeting law does not typically provide for attendance and participation for purposes of a quorum via telephone, I would recommend that that part of that language be excised. It seemed kind of peculiar to me that the Authority Budget Office put out a model charter that had something that appears to me to be at odds with the open meetings law. But that might be my failing, not theirs, and I'll look further into that. Basically, so we're talking about participation in person at meetings or via video conference. Now, before you decide as a committee that you want to allow participation via video conference, keep in mind that wherever you set that up becomes a meeting spot as well, and that means the public can participate from that location. So if we set up a video conference and you, for instance, Mr. Astafan, want to use the Watertown office, that's great. You want Mr. Finkel's participation, and you are going to convene in Watertown, and he's going to participate from Mayfield. If his choice is to participate from his home, and video conferencing facilities he may personally own, he's just opened up his home as a meeting spot. Nice of him, but not necessarily something that he might want to do. So it's just something to think about. Other than that, the changes to the committee charters necessitate a change to the bylaws. And we had prepared draft bylaws, or draft changes to the bylaws. The only changes to those bylaws would be with respect to the number of committees. If you did want to go from 3 to 4, our proposal had 3. A 4th would mean a change there. And then a question as to how you want to enumerate the duties of each of these committees. In the past, the bylaws have had 9 committees listed, and if we're going to 3 today, we ought to change the bylaws to go to 3. And the duties of each of those 9 committees were listed or written out in longhand in the bylaws. What I would propose is that the committee consider referring in the bylaws to the committee charters that the committee will be preparing and that the board will be approving at some later date, so that you don't have to change the bylaws every time you want to set up a committee. For instance, if we go with the 3 mandated, governance, audit, and finance now, and in the spring put together a charter for another committee, say operations, you don't want to have to amend the bylaws again in the spring in order to countenance a committee, whether that be a permanent committee or an ad hoc committee. The bylaws really ought to be a very durable document, not subject to revision at whim.
What I'd like to do, provided that Albert's on board, and steer me in the right direction here if I'm wrong, but I'd like to do this all at once. And I know we're going into a new year here, but I would assume that everything will carry over as it was last year until we make all the changes. Am I correct?
Well, at this point, there are 9 standing committees in the bylaws. If the chair of the board elects to appoint members to each of those 9 committees, those committees could either meet or not meet. If he wants to leave those vacant, I suppose he could do so. The only 3 he's required to have, and that we're required to operate, are governance, audit, and finance, each of which I believe are supposed to meet at least 2 times a year. Governance has got 1 under its belt already.
Any thoughts? I just don't want to have us rush into, changing everything over. I mean,
They're required to meet twice a year, and if they don't,
Each of those 3 committees are required. to
oh, just
meet.
those 3.
Right.
Right.
Oh, okay.
The others are not. You could simply, each of those committees are staffed with board members now. You could simply continue that staffing.
just rolls over. Or
Roll
you could-
over
and
until-
we don't meet in February, so I figure by the time the March meeting comes around, governance should be able to have everything reviewed with council, at least with the 3 committees,
Right.
the mandated committees, and we could move right into March's meeting with approving it for the board.
Organizing it. And organizing it.
Hopefully, we'll be able to have the operations language done by then, but if not, it's understandable. But the other thing I wanted us to do as a board, governance board, and if we suggest any changes, certainly have the full board take a look at them. But I think it's time, since we're doing this, to look at the entire body of the bylaws. There might need to be some tweaking there, and then again, there may not. So, we can do 2 things at the same time. Rob, do you see any issues with you preparing the recommended changes in draft form and getting those off to the governance committee at some time in the near future?
I could certainly do that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, why don't we do that? It's all right with Albert. And then the governance committee will correspond with you via email back and forth and get it tweaked. And once we've gotten it where we think we'd like to have it, where it makes sense, then I'll have staff send it off to the entire board for their review. And then have them take a look, and if they have any suggestions, we can tweak it again. And hopefully by March's meeting, we can move right into governance. Everything will be in line, get it passed, send it over to the full board. Does that make sense? or-
It does.
Good timeline.
In looking at, the 3 charters are done.
Yeah.
The bylaws are pretty much done. Minor tweaks that you might want to try to address. We've tried to address some of the things that we saw that we thought needed a little changing. If we do put together an operations committee, the structure of those charter, or the structure of that charter, will be similar to the structure of the charters for audit, finance, and governance. And I think I can probably fill in most of the blanks to be consistent with those other charters. The duties are really my only area of concern. I'm assuming for operations that we'd want to put the reservoir operations under operations and the access permit system under operations.
I think where I'd go with that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, Mike, I would think that you would have the most knowledge as to what we would be looking at under operations along with maybe some other staff? Is it possible that,
Operations would include a lot
Yeah.
of what we do currently during the regular meeting. Most of the contracts, not all of them, but most, are related to reservoir operations. You know, there are, of course, other more administrative ones that are, just administrative, for lack of a better word.
but I mean, if you worked with Rob and then pulled in other staff members, I would think that would help Rob.
Sure.
Or do you need the board's help?
Well, we
I know
have
we can
talked
tweak
about
it,
this.
but you know what I'm saying?
We have talked about this to some extent. I mean, certain things like personnel remains in governance. Procurement remains in governance. Audit has the internal controls, and
Finance.
finance has the budget.
Finance is internal.
Fine.
And the budget.
Okay.
Right, auditors.
The things that are unique to us that don't fit cookie cutter into governance would really end up in operations.
Almost all of
That's what I was saying. I mean, between you and staff, you could put that list together. We could take a look at it and see whether or not, we want to tweak it or if we agree with it, and then, I mean, that gives you the assistance you need, or?
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. You have anything else at this point?
No.
Great, thank you so much. Unless Albert or Dave, you have any questions, that's where we're at with governance. Hopefully, come March, we will have everything in writing and ready for everybody's review. Otherwise, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Mr. Chairman?